Pretty much every business in 2026 is racing to implement AI, and that includes medical practices, whether that's automating scheduling, automating check-in, automating paperwork, anything that can be offset with automation or amplified with AI. Pretty much people are racing to do it. But what practices aren't realizing is that it's leaving patients more frustrated than ever. And it may actually be costing you patients, which is the opposite of what you want the technology to do. So in this episode, we're going to dive into what's actually happening when you're automating and not thinking through the strategy and the process behind it, and also how it's affecting the long-term growth of your business. So stay tuned as we dive into that. If we haven't met yet, I'm Elisa Connor, and I show up every week in your YouTube feed to talk about strategy specifically for organizations that are spending money on marketing and aren't seeing the results from the marketing investment that they're making. I specifically work with medical organizations, orthopedic surgeons, concierge medicine, and functional medicine, but I also have a lot of experience in working with service providers, specifically B2B service providers. So if you are implementing AI at light speed, you're going to want to stay tuned to this episode because we're going to dive into the things you need to think about before you start putting AI to work for you. So some of the things that the medical community specifically are automating with AI are appointment scheduling, appointment reminders, patient education, billing, portal messages within the patient portal, and also medical intake forms. But what they're not taking into consideration when they're adapting all of these things is they're not thinking about what the processes behind the automation are now, whether or not they're working, and how they're affecting their patients and who their patients are, who the majority of their patients are. More importantly, they're not looking at who their patients are going to be in the next 5, 10, 15 years, because the model of patient and the adaptability of their patient is changing radically. And that mostly has to do with the change in generations that are moving through their system. And so some of the things that are being automated today need to take into account what's happening now, what's working, what's not working, and what actually can be automated, and what's going to make patients still feel like they are important, valued, and that they are being treated as though they're a person and not just another number or a cog coming through the office. Oftentimes, as you may know, if you're in the medical world, private equity is purchasing smaller organizations, and those smaller organizations don't run the same as private equity. Private equity, their big motivation is to get as many people in and out the door as possible. They don't really care about client experience. So if you're trying to compete with them, one of the best ways to do that is to outhuman them. And people will come to you specifically because they know they're going to be treated like a human. So how do you balance implementing AI and making things smoother and less stressful and less work for your staff with still providing an excellent customer experience? Well, that's what we're going to dive into today. So let's take the example of scheduling. That is something that a lot of times organizations will try to automate, or whether they're using AI or a different automation software. And I do a lot of site audits for medical practices, and I see you're in one of three camps. One, you've automated your scheduling and it's working great. Two, you automated your scheduling and it's a giant pain and nobody's going to go through the hurdles that you've put in front of them to get a scheduled appointment online. So they either click out of the form and don't complete it and go call the office, or they click out of the form and go to your competitor. And then the third camp is no online scheduling exists at all. The third camp, if they don't have any online scheduling, they run into other problems. One being they don't have enough operators, so people are getting a busy signal. They're not going to wait. They're not going to wait for you to call them back, or there is no option for you to call them back because you haven't implemented the ability to do that. Or if they're getting a busy signal, they're like, well, they're too busy for me, so I'm going to go to the competitor. Or they get transferred 3 times and finally get to where they need to be and feel like so much of their time has already been wasted just being transferred. Or they get sent to an automated menu that makes them go through 5, 10, 15 different options before they ever get to talk to anyone. All of those lead to them hanging up and going to your competitor. So if you haven't started to implement online scheduling, please, for the love of Pete, go do it. But before you do that, or watch the rest of this video so you know how to do it correctly. So if you're in one of the camps that's you've either started to implement online scheduling or you have something going, but you haven't tested it or you haven't gotten feedback, stay tuned as well, because you likely are struggling with some of the challenges that we're going to cover in just a few minutes. And if you have online scheduling and it is working, still stay tuned, because there might be some things that you need to optimize that you hadn't even thought of. When you're looking to optimize online scheduling specifically, you need to look at what that process is right now, where people are coming in, what's working, what's not working, sort of what we just went through, or I just went through before diving into the problem areas. Because if you just automate what's happening right now and it isn't working, you're just automating a broken system or a non-existent system. And so you need to think through from the patient perspective, what is going to give them the best experience? And when you're looking at it from that perspective, it immediately makes you stand out from your competitors. Your competitors aren't thinking about that. They're thinking about how quickly can we get people through a process, not how does it make them feel so that they want to come to our organization and stay with us. And not only that, but tell their friends and family about us. So when you're looking at automating, you really need to look at the process behind what you're trying to automate. And more importantly, you need to look at how that process impacts your patients. So instead of asking, what should we automate first, or what can we take off of somebody's to-do list? Instead, which patient interactions are building trust? Which patient interactions are causing friction and making them work harder than they need to? And which parts of our business are actually invisible to our patients? Can you guess where you need to start? Where you need to start the automation of those three options? If you guessed the parts that are invisible to your patients, that'd be correct. Because you don't want to automate things that are going to shine you in an unfavorable light. And when you automate things and you don't have the ability to test them thoroughly and make sure that the patient experience is exceptional, you're going to cause more friction. And that friction leads to people leaving, leads to people going to your competitors, leads to people leaving poor reviews, leads to people not referring you or your business. And so when you're thinking through the process of what should we automate first, it should really be those things that are behind the scenes. And the things behind the scenes typically are things that can be handled, that can be tested, and can be implemented without affecting how the outside world looks at you. So if you're looking at this from the perspective of your patient base and the things that you're trying to automate and things that can go wrong, here are a few examples. One site that I went to, they had a chatbot in the corner that would start asking you questions. Well, before you could even get to like, what is wrong with you? And it was supposed to be a kind of 24-hour emergency, like get in touch with a medical professional chatbot. So before you could even get into that, they want to collect all of this information about you, like you're making an appointment. And I'm like, I'm not giving you any information because I just want to know if you can even help me with, my sprained ankle, for example. And so that was causing a lot of friction for me as an outsider. Is why do you want to collect all of this information if I don't even know if I'm going to make an appointment with you yet? So understanding the purpose of your chatbot and explaining that well to your audience is really important. So to help you effectively implement AI into your practice, I've created a 5-step strategic framework. So when you're putting your organization through a upheaval of trying to automate some of the processes and systems in your organization, the first thing you need to do is audit. You need to audit exactly what those processes are and who they affect more often than not. And if the impact is going to be on the patient, then you probably need to rethink having that be the priority for you adding AI and automating a task. And if you're going to move forward with that, I highly recommend that you include everyone that is affected by that process, whatever process you want to automate, be involved so that you know exactly how that process touches every department in your practice. Because if you have, for example, a process that affects billing and you are only asking your schedulers about the process, there is going to be an upheaval and probably a blowout of the process once you start to automate it, and it's going to end up coming from billing because they weren't included. So the first thing you need to do is look at the processes you want to automate. See how many of them will be of no impact or very little impact to your patients. And three, you need to make sure that you are auditing each part of the process and including everybody that touches that process before you start automation. So when you have that audit, I recommend choosing one process to automate first. And the reason behind that is that if you jump in and try to automate a bunch of things at one time, you're not going to know when things break or what's breaking what. And it's just going to cause upheaval and confusion and frustration, not only from your team and your staff, but also from your patients and the people that would be the best referral partners for you. Step number one of the framework is to audit what's going on right now and what potential processes would be most benefited by automation. So the second part of this process is determining what actually to automate and creating the automation of that process. And so when you're looking at this, you want to look at processes that are standardized, that don't have a lot of patient forward touches, and that can be that the expectation is that these things would be automated. So you're looking at things like scheduling reminders, you're looking at things like follow-up booking links, things that are transactional and time sensitive, but that don't necessarily require a conversation between the patient and the doctor or the patient and your team. When you look at automating those things, it would be a no-brainer. And so looking at that process and seeing how many people are affected by that process and how you can get their time back is a great way to also determine whether the process should be automated. Other things to think about are there processes between when the patient is finished with their appointment and the next piece of the process is they need to move to billing. What parts of that can be automated? Because that's all behind the scenes. And so things that are not necessarily directly impacting the patient, those are the processes you want to look at automating and then create a process to automate those things that ensures everybody that's being touched by that gets to be in the room when those automations are being tested so that you can identify any problem areas before they become problems. You also want to ensure that you are implementing technology that is going to be effective and not cause more challenges to your team. For example, having a really high learning curve with new technology, because that is it. If it's too hard for people to learn, you're either going to have friction of them struggling to learn it and do their job, or the opposite, which is they're just not going to learn it. They're going to quit and go somewhere else. So when you're implementing technology, make sure you are adopting the right solution for your team and that everybody's on board and feels like that it's attainable and easy to implement from their perspective so that you have a smoother implementation as you automate. How you're going to know the success is successful is how much time is being freed up by the automation, whose time specifically is being freed up, and are you able to plug them into other places so that you can better use their skill set to amplify your customer experience, your patient experience, so that you are standing out from your competitors and you are not only saving time within your organization, but you are becoming known for how you have enhanced and made people feel like humans again. Because at the end of the day, people want to be treated like people. They want to be treated special, like they're special, which leads us to the third part of the framework, which is attend. And at the end of the day, this is where you have the ability to shine. Your practice has the ability to shine and outshine your competitors. Because if you are attending to the needs of your patients, for example, if there are moments in an interaction that require more empathy and more time and more conversation, if there's an unexpected diagnosis, for example, and you have the time available because you've automated some other tasks to have those longer conversations with the patients or make sure that they understand, next steps after an unexpected surgery or whatever that might be, that's going to make you stand out as not only the caring physicians that you are, because you do care about your patients, but also that you took the time to not just rush on to the next person. Like you have the time built in now because you've automated the things that were, taking time before, patient notes, whatever that is. So you have the time to be present. So take the time to be present, build that into your process so that it doesn't feel forced and it doesn't feel like, you have free time that is just being spent somewhere else with behind the organization. But instead, you're using that to build better patient experiences and better connection and conversation because those moments of connection are what are going to lead to higher referrals, higher retention of patients if they need to come back, and also higher all online happiness, Google reviews, um, the way that people talk about you when you're not in the room. So spend the time to create those really impactful customer experience moments, and you will, in fact, rise above your competition quicker and stay above them, honestly, regardless of the size of the organization, because you put the time and effort in to intentionally create that attend part of the framework. Typically, when organizations automate, they can run into some hurdles. Instead of improving patient experience, they actually make it worse. And so some of the things that organizations will do is they will either take the time that was being used previously prior to automating, and they will reduce headcount. So they'll get rid of one person at the front desk that was answering phone calls, or they'll take the time that that person invested and they'll actually make them answer more phone calls or do other tasks that are behind the scenes. Instead of empowering that person to build relationships and build customer experience with patients, and at the end of the day, this is a huge missed opportunity because it's one of the only ways that you're going to differentiate yourself significantly from your competitors, and especially those guys that have, ridiculously unlimited amounts of money to spend on marketing. And at the end of the day, people want to be treated like people, not a number. And so if you're automating and then you're just pushing more automation, and you're not creating connection and creating a way for your patients to feel like they're human beings and that you care for them, what have you really saved? Instead, patients might be feeling like, oh, great, now I'm just another number. Everything is automated at this office, or I'm just a transaction. They just want my money. Or they may even have additional challenges that weren't there before. Like, this tech is super confusing to use. My computer doesn't load it. I don't want to use it, depending on the age of the patient, whatever it might be. And so that is actually making the patient experience worse than what it was prior. If you're going to take the time to automate some of these things to improve customer experience, then let's make sure that you're investing the time back into those relationships. So whether that is following up on post-surgical patients to see, if there's anything that they need post-surgery, or if they need another patient, or if they need another appointment, if it is, having longer conversations with patients or potential patients before they leave the office, looking at things that even though you might have short-term cost savings by eliminating a position or moving workflow to fill, the space that automation took up, that's really taking away from your long-term investment, which is your patients. At the end of the day, your patients will become your biggest referrers. So if you're doing activities that increase customer experience and patient experience, and making them feel like humans, they become the reason that your practice grows, not some outside source. So let's look at this from a dollar and cents perspective. If you're looking at what typically automation looks like, if you decide to automate your patient scheduling and you save, say 10 hours a week by automating scheduling. You have an automating appointment scheduler. Not everybody's going to use it, but let's just say the majority of people do use it. That means you can reduce your front desk staff by probably around 25%. So that might be one person if you have four people. And so that would save you around $35,000 a year in your office, roughly, on average. So the patient experience is slightly worse because they either have to wait, they're on hold, or they go through an automated process and don't talk to you. At the end of the day, this causes a reduction in patients because they either hang up, they go to your competitor, or they're frustrated and don't tell other friends and family about you because they're like, you can't ever get a hold of anyone. That would be the exact phrase they probably use. Your referrals flatten out, which means you have declining revenue. And so if that's the case, you've saved $35,000, but you've lost probably $80,000 in patient referral revenue. Versus if you reinvest that 10 hours and you enhance your customer experience, let's walk through those numbers. So that 10 hours that is freed up can then be invested into customer experience instead. And so what does that look like? So your team now has time to welcome patients effectively. They might even have pre-appointment phone calls that they make to make sure that people have everything they need, the directions they need, and as a reminder to like get people in the door because people will ignore texts, they will ignore automations, but they might actually pick up if it's a real person. They also have the ability to follow up with people. So they've had an in-office procedure or they are post-surgery or whatever that is to check in. If I would have had somebody check in on me after my ankle surgery, I think I would have fallen on the floor because it never happened. So what a great way to differentiate yourself um, from your competitors. Now, in my instance, when I had ankle surgery, the customer experience was not great. Like when I got out of surgery, I never even saw the doctor. In fact, I woke up from anesthesia and there was nobody there. Like the nurse wasn't there. There was no one there. And so I never did see the doctor even before I left because he was in surgery, which is understandable, but they should have had someone there to answer my questions, to make sure I had everything I needed to, get to the car because you can't walk. Like you have this giant, you can't put any weight on your foot. And so receiving a post follow-up call would have made a huge difference in how I experienced my entire ankle surgery because where it stands now, I felt very much like a number and like I did not feel cared for, and I would not recommend anybody go there. And so you're leaving money on the table and you're actually prohibiting people by not investing in customer experience because that small um, act would have made all the difference. And so the other thing you can use that time for is to have your team reach out for people that are overdue for care or that might need, some coaching before some pre-op coaching before their surgery, or even education about things that they might need. So another example is when I had my ankle surgery, I had no idea that, I would need a knee scooter, that I would need crutches. Like there was no information given except for like a printed out document that was buried beneath a bunch of other paperwork about what I would actually need. The only reason I knew what I needed was because I was lucky enough to be connected with an organization that my mom volunteers with that they lend out hospital equipment. And so because I went there and I was like, hey, I'm having ankle surgery, they're like, oh, you're going to need this, you're going to need that. I was like, how do you even know? And they're like, because we do this all the time. And so when you're going to an outside organization from your surgeon and you're getting more information and a better customer experience, where do you think you're going to go next time? You're probably not going to go back to that office, and you're definitely not going to tell anybody about that office, but you are going to tell everybody over about the hospital lending program, equipment lending program. And that has been my case. So reinvesting those things, that time into those patient care moments and patient experience moments comes back tenfold because it's not costing you anything. The time was already there, but your patient experience is dramatically better. And not only that, um, patients are going to stick with you. So if they need an additional surgery or they need additional care, by at least 12% on average. And then the chance that they're going to refer you to their friends and family is significantly higher. It's somewhere upwards around 28 to 30%. And what does that do to your revenue? If you have a 30% influx of patients, new patients that come in the door, that can be up to $350,000 in revenue or more. And so you see the difference here is like you have the short-term win of like maybe getting rid of an employee or retasking that employee with other tasks that are not patient-centered. You might save $35,000, but if you actually reinvest that time, it could be 10 times the initial investment to your practice and even more because you have to measure it from a individual perspective. These are just averages, but it could be a 10 to 1 return. And so when you're thinking about how you're going to utilize the time that you're saving through automation, that is really going to be the best benefit overall for you and your practice. So don't just jump into the automation ball game without thinking through one, how it's going to go through your organization, but two, how you're going to reutilize that time because that really is the benefit to any of this. So at the end of the day, automating it can be great for your practice or it can be detrimental, especially when it comes to patient experience. So when you're implementing and automating, creating an automation process within your business and you're thinking about implementing AI, think through how it's going to affect your patients. Because at the end of the day, if you have the opportunity to increase patient experience that delivers a 10 to 1 profit for your practice, it's probably worth taking the time to sit down and think through that process and think through specifically the things that we talked about in this video, which are, how is it going to affect um, how is the process you're going to automate affect your patients overall? Is it going to cause more friction or is it going to make their lives easier? And more importantly, is how is that automation going to affect the majority of your patients now and in 5 years, 10 years, and down the line? Because patient demographics and requirements are changing. And so being ahead of the curve and knowing that, current 60-year-olds maybe struggle with technology a little bit more than patients that are going to be 55 and 60 in the next 5 years. And the reason I say that is because there's generation transfer happening. You have a lot of boomers that are, they're becoming older and may still be patients of yours, but you have an incoming influx of people that were born without technology, but are huge, quick adapters, and that's Gen X and older. And so knowing not only your current demographic, but the demographics you want to move into are really going to help you determine what you automate and how you automate it and how it's going to affect them. And so when you're looking at those processes, think about the ways that your current patient climate likes to be interacted with, but also what is the experience for your incoming or newly developing patient demographic? Because those processes may be different. One of the things that I do is I audit medical practices and I look at the places that maybe your systems are broken or what's happening online from a potential patient perspective and see things that may not be right. Or if you started to implement and automate things, I go through the process and I give you feedback on things that are not working, why they're not working, and what your competitors are doing differently that is ensuring that the people that are going through your process are actually ending up over there and how to stop it. And so if you are interested in having one of those audits done, it's a quick video. It's 5 minutes. I go through and I give you 3 items that you could work on right away. And I do it for free. So if you're interested in that, if you comment audit below the video, or send me a message, I will complete that audit for you. So if you're interested in that, just put audit in the comments and I'm happy to create that audit. And then we can have a little conversation about, which website you want me to look at, and all of those things, because I want to make sure I plug in the right information. So if you're interested in having a complete marketing audit done, and give you a plan of what to focus on for the next 30 days, just put audit in the comments and I'd be happy to do that. In the meantime, I hope that you are thinking about automating and implementing AI because it is very powerful. But I also hope that you've taken the things that we've talked about in this video, and that you put them into place when you're thinking about automating, because automating can be very helpful and free up a lot of time when it's done right. But when it's done wrong, it actually causes more breakdowns, ineffective customer relationships, and it can, at the end of the day, impact your profits and your growth for your practice substantially. And so I want you to be successful and I want you to be able to free up the time that you can through automation, but also do that effectively. So if you have enjoyed this video, I would love for you to give it a thumbs up. And if you are so inclined, I'd love for you to share this with somebody else who would find benefit in it. Thanks so much for tuning in. I will see you next week. In the meantime, take care, be well, and stay safe.